Queen Camilla's had to cancel some engagements with a chest infection this week. It does appear that she's on the mend because she is booked in for something next week as well. But even though she'll be out of action in person, she does have her documentary on domestic abuse coming out next week. Now, I believe you've seen it, Sarah, and you had a preview. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, this is a documentary, a 90-minute film, Her Majesty Queen Camilla Behind Closed Doors, and it has followed her for a year, focusing on her work with domestic violence and domestic abuse and trying to raise awareness of that and to give survivors a voice. And it's an incredibly powerful, hard-hitting watch. We see her never-before-seen footage of her going into a refuge, meeting survivors of domestic abuse. And she talks, you can hear the passion in her voice about why this is so important to her. It's something she's been doing for more than a decade. But she has a remarkable platform to be able to raise awareness. And watching it, I mean, we watched it at a special screening at Buckingham Palace. You could have heard a pin drop, and there were gasps, audible gasps of breath as some of the statistics came up. There's a call to the police every 30 seconds about domestic abuse, and that's those that manage to make the call. And that's seen as being only a quarter of potential cases. And it was only in 1991 that rape became a crime within marriage. Until then, it was just seen as a wife's duty. I mean, I was horrified. That's not very long ago.
I can tell it's had a big impact on you.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of thing I think it will then...
I think if you watch it, it really does make you stop and think just how widespread and prevalent this is.
So the figures that jumped out at me, in fact, I got a sense of preview and watched it last night at home, and the figures that jump out at you are that 3 women take their own lives every week. Every week. Because of domestic violence, and 30 women contemplated every week as well. And, you know, I've been to a refuge with Camilla before, and she does this work a lot. And even when we go on foreign trips, I mean, it doesn't always get a lot of coverage because there's so much else going on. Yeah. But in Australia and in Samoa recently, she went to, the charities that help women who are trying to flee abusive relationships. And I agree, I thought it was really moving, really powerful. It shows Camilla in a completely different light, but also that I think she's got not just a professional connection as like, I'm the Queen and I'm the head of this, I'm the patron of this charity, a real kind of personal connection with the women and the survivors, and you could see that.
You can see the tears in her eyes at multiple points, actually, as she's speaking to survivors, families who've lost someone to domestic abuse. But she also talks about discussing it with her grandchildren, her granddaughters in particular, and getting the teenage girl's perspective on it. I mean, it's something she really does take home and live and breathe.
Is it fair to say, from hearing what you're both saying about the documentary, and also we discussed on the show last week the fact that Prince William's homelessness documentary showed a side of him that we had never seen before. Is it fair to say that we're seeing a different side of Camilla through this documentary?
I think so. Well, it's a side that we kind of see on the road with her quite often. But not everything makes it into the newspapers. Not everything makes it onto the TV or on social media. So I kind of think it shows a real side of Camilla that perhaps many members of the public haven't seen before. And actually, one of the reasons this started, and she had an interest for a decade or more, but she met the mother, Diana Parks, whose daughter had been killed by her husband. And the very first meeting she went to, she heard the whole story about what happened and just how dreadful it was. And she was openly crying in that room. Yeah. She says in the documentary, even the policemen and the journalists in the room were crying as well. And you could see how she was so moved by that. I think that was the moment she thought, I've got this platform and I'm going to do something about it. And I thought, interestingly, they had the former Prime Minister Theresa May in the programme as well, talking about, isn't this amazing that we've got a Queen consort who's putting her name to this and using her platform in this way? Yeah,
Cherie Blair also in it. Sir Patrick Stewart, the actor whose father abused his own mother and he as a child witnessed it. There are some really powerful voices in there. But what comes through loud and clear for me, and I think this is what the Queen wants to achieve, is that she's giving a voice to those survivors of domestic abuse, and you really hear their stories. It's not actually all about her. She's enabling them to be able to tell their
using
stories.
Her platform. But
using it so effectively,
it's a balancing act when you're making a programme. You want to make it all about the member of the royal family who's taking part. But I think they've done a very clever weave between using Camilla's voice and using her as the guide, if you like, but actually, as you say, giving a voice to a number of women who are, well, many women who are all fortunately, survivors.
So this will air next week, and it sounds like, from what you've both said, it's a must-watch. So thank you for giving us your thoughts. Yeah. We'll move along now back to Robert Hardman's book, because there is something else in it that's generated a lot of attention recently, which is the news that the King reportedly recently finally cut Prince Andrew's alleged £1 million a year spending allowance. Now, a lot of people have been calling for this for some time. Do you think it goes far enough, though, or do you think that he should also evict him from Royal Lodge?
I think Andrew was always going to have a difficult time when there was a change of reign, because famously his mother, well, whether for favourite son or not, but I think as a parent you're much more forgiving of your children than a sibling is of another sibling. And that is kind of playing out in front of us now, isn't it? There's the King saying, look, you've been convicted of nothing in court, nothing's been proven in court, but reputationally you're damaged goods. You're living in this vast mansion. I would like it for something else.
And he's not a working royal. He's not working.
You're not a working royal. Do you need £1 million a year? Again, it comes back to this, and there's this whole other issue this week about the sort of private income and the duchies of Cornwall and Lancaster. But the King has this private income. There's nothing to do with the taxpayers' money that he can decide what to do with. And clearly the late Queen was quite happy to give some of that money to her son, Prince Andrew, but the King isn't.
What I found most interesting in Robert Hardman's book is that he says that the Queen, the late Queen, was planning, if she'd lived another year, she was planning to
reluctantly was
Andrew
she?
from Royal Lodge. But would she ever have done it? Because, as you say, he was always thought to be her favourite son. And look, the King doesn't relish confrontation either, does he? And I think he's hoped that through these various channels, by, cutting off the security provision, because it's not within the security ring of steel on the Windsor estate, and by cutting off the funding for Prince Andrew, that might force him out, because, it's a big place. It's falling into disrepair, as we've seen photos of it. And, what does he need a 30-room mansion for?
And it's the optics of that. It's, Frogmore Cottage is sitting there empty. As you say, it's a 30-room mansion that apparently just has him and Fergie in it.
And he's adamant that he has a cast-iron lease with the Crown Estate. It's not for the King to meddle in that. He's got it till 2078, which will be beyond his lifetime, but he clearly wants to hand it on to his daughters. And that he apparently has alternative sources of income now through some of his contacts from international trade. I'm not sure that his wealthy benefactor friends have done him any favours in the past, a la Jeffrey Epstein, have they?
Yeah, no, and often got him into trouble, even if you take Jeffrey Epstein out of the picture. But no, I kind of agree with you, and what you say about optics is very important, because do you remember when they had that Easter service and Prince Andrew was sort of like front of the pack, grinning like a Cheshire cat? I kind of think anyone advising him, or maybe he should advise himself and say, well, given everything that's happened, hang back, look a bit sombre, read the room, just
more of a target on his back, I think, with King Charles needing to take action as well. I personally think, that's just my opinion. But when you're right in front of everyone all the time and you have suffered such reputational damage,